Hi, everybody. Jared Bruning here with the Daily Bellringer, and it's been a while since I've done one of these, but of course, sometimes I like to share some cool resources or just some neat things that I've happened upon that are things that I think teachers can use in the classroom, or maybe homeschooling parents at home can use. And so, as you can see, I'm wearing my We the People hat, and that's because this evening we're going to be talking about the Constitution, which is an extremely important thing that we cover each year. Of course, one of those things that is required in most states that everybody has to cover the Constitution at some point. I know I already covered it this year with my students in my own classes. And so, what I wanted to talk about this evening is this really cool book. I guess I'll bring the book in here first. If you look right here, this is U.S. Constitution Rhymes. All right, it says "Fun and Easy Way to Learn and Love the Constitution" by Debbi Rollo. All right, and actually this evening, who I have with me, I have Debbi Rollo with me, and we're going to kind of talk a little bit about this book and talk about some ways that you can teach the Constitution and everything. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and welcome Debbi into the conversation here. So how you doing, Debbi?
Good. Thank you so much for having me, Jared.
Yeah. I'm excited to have you here tonight talking about this and everything. And so, here in a moment, we got a little bit of a presentation, a little bit that we'll get into here in just a moment. But I guess first off, I just wanted you to see if you could tell us a little bit about your background.
Oh, sure. Let's see. So how my background goes. I, my background for starting the book, I guess I would say, or for doing the whole U.S. Constitution rhymes, kind of started way back when I was a homeschool mom, years and years ago. I've always loved U.S. history, at least as an adult, and I've loved, especially anything patriotic or liberty-minded and things like that. So then I ended up homeschooling my son when he was about 6 years old, one of my children. And I discovered really quickly that if I was going to homeschool, brand new for me, I needed to make sure that I did it in a way that actually was interesting, that caught his attention, that it could stick, which is not always easy. I'm sure you know as a teacher. Anyway, so I had to discover that. And I very quickly figured out I had to do things that were engaging and different and hands-on and activities. And I ended up really enjoying creating games. I make little games and things like that. And then when we started to do certain things that were more difficult to grasp, I kind of discovered that I could turn things into rhymes, like just little, like commercials do, like just little jingles, little rhymes, little poems, things like that. And that kind of worked for me, and it became really fun. And then fast forward years down the road, when I started studying the Constitution, then I realized, this is kind of really important, and it's something that I could turn into rhymes. So I just ended up kind of doing that. Somebody recommended it who knew I had done some other rhyming stuff and everything, and I thought, oh, I should try the Constitution. So I just kind of took little chunks at a time and started turning the Constitution into little rhyming phrases. And it was so much fun. I fell in love with the Constitution, and I thought this could be really helpful for homeschoolers, for parents, for educators, anybody. A fun way, engaging way to understand and learn the Constitution. So I created books to do that. So that's like kind of my background and my inspiration for doing my books.
Well, yeah, very cool. And with the Constitution, that it's written in a way that it's difficult for especially if you're teaching it to kids. It's difficult to try to get them to wrap their head around. Here's Article 1, Section 2. And it's like, what in the world does that mean? And so the cool thing with her book, and I suppose I'll show it here a little bit, and I know we're going to kind of get into showing some individual things, but some neat things that she's done here. She just has little rhymes that go with like each. Whoops, let me pull it over here so you can see it a little better. Just little rhymes that like go with each one of the articles and amendments and everything like that. And then the cool thing is too, there's also and I'm sure we'll talk about this in a moment, there's actually another volume of it here that has kind of a side by side thing where you actually see the Constitution itself, the text from the Constitution itself, and then a rhyme over here that helps you to remember it a little bit better. So it's a really cool idea, a really neat way to look at the Constitution and everything. And so I was going to ask you, of course, what inspired you to write the book, but you kind of covered that you are a homeschooler and you're trying to find engaging ways to to have students learn the Constitution. And I was going to add too, the neat thing with this book is that yeah, you could use it with, I suppose, younger elementary age kids, but I think it would be applicable all the way up through high school even, to be able to use it to kind of just remember some of those key points of the Constitution. So I guess thinking of key points of the Constitution, what do you think is probably the most difficult or misunderstood part of the Constitution? Is there a certain part that you think is probably the most misunderstood or difficult to understand?
Yeah, well, let's see. I'm thinking that there's some, misunderstood things in the Constitution. One that comes to mind is maybe the separation of church and state. I think that's one of the things that kind of end up being a little bit misunderstood, where some people might think it means that there should be no religion or church or anything mixed with any government or school or anything like that, where others might say it was more to make sure that there can't be a state church, like England had and things like that. It's more protection for religion. And so I think that takes some study. And I think when you look back at what the founders intended and things like that, you can figure that out. I think that's when I know that the 3/5 clause is always a little bit misunderstood, where it's about representation, not so much about whether a slave is considered a full person or not, and that can kind of get tricky. So that takes some study, and I don't know, in general, I think I realize that a lot of people are confused about our country in America right now. I think they don't quite know what to believe about our country, and I think that gets connected to the Constitution, so there's a lot of assumptions, because in general, I think that not a lot of people read, most adults don't read the Constitution, honestly, most. And kids, maybe they learn in school, I don't know how much they retain. So I'm thinking that a lot of times people are like, should I love my country? Should I be excited about my country? Or should I be embarrassed and ashamed of our history or our founding fathers? It's like, what do I believe? So I think along with that, then sometimes people are like, well, if our country might be bad, then maybe our Constitution's bad. I don't quite know. So, I don't know. I just think that there could be a lot of assumptions. And of course, the solution is read the Constitution and study. It's really interesting. There's so much in there to learn and know. And I think most people would not even disagree with most things in there if they actually study it. But so I created my book so that we could make it fun and interesting.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, like for me personally, of course, I teach the Constitution in junior high classroom. I also have a series of videos covering the Constitution, and I always get comments from people saying basically, I wish our politicians would go through and learn this. That a lot of times we have people in leadership that I don't think have necessarily even taken the time to look and see what our Constitution actually says in it and what it's all about and everything, and understand all of it. And I like the fact too that you brought up. So many times we have people that, are like, do I be proud of my country or should I be ashamed of our country? Well, you think about the Constitution. I mean, it's the oldest Constitution still in use in the world. That kind of tells you a little bit about it, that it's actually a really ingenious document that is still applicable even to this day. So yeah, it's definitely something worth studying, that we need to be studying, that we need to be emphasizing and learning more. And I suppose for me too, personally, as an educator, we generally cover the Constitution somewhere like in middle school, and then sometimes kids don't touch it again. That's it. And I very much advocate for if we can have, cover it in middle school and then cover it again more in depth, like when they're later in high school, because it's like you really need to kind of get a refresher right before you're about to get that right to vote, that you understand what your civic duty is and, what we're supposed to be doing with it. So I guess another quick question here. I mean, how do you think we as educators could do a better job of teaching the Constitution? Do you have any thoughts about that? Like maybe what we could do better in teaching it?
Let's see. To be honest, I don't really know how educators teach the Constitution, so that would actually be really interesting to find out. I'd love to be in a classroom and see how it's taught. But I do know by studying the Constitution and writing my books and talking to people and everything, that it could get pretty complicated, definitely even for adults, more or less students. So I think the simpler, the better. So when you can just simplify it and try to break it into pieces, like in my books, I put every section, every clause with little parts, with little rhymes, and I don't know, just being able to one little part at a time and discuss it and talk about that so it's not so overwhelming might be one way. And then So that's one thing that comes to mind, and I think there's so many good resources. Yours is one, your Bellringer, the videos, the tools and resources that are available right now. It's amazing how many wonderful tools and resources there are right now to make it a little bit more interesting and I think I had a few more ideas on that. But well, one thing I was thinking is about how much influence a teacher has over the students or parents and people. So I think that when a student sees that the teacher is excited about the Constitution, knows the Constitution, is going out of their way to make sure that they're teaching them how it applies to them in their life or how it could apply in their future or finding engaging ways to teach the Constitution, I think that could create a good spark for kids, to be able to say, oh, my teacher who I respect is, they really love the Constitution or just teaching me about it. And I think that could be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes we as educators and parents kind of just forget how much of an influence we have over our kids, not just our own personal children, but, kids in the classroom. I mean, we have a big influence. And, one thing that I really advocate for, and I try my best, at least, in my resources and my Bellringer videos, is just trying to be as unbiased as possible because I just feel like, so much today, especially when you're looking for resources online, you got to be really careful because you'll get resources that are very skewed one way or another. And it's like you need to just find those resources that are just kind of here's the flat history of this topic or, flat interpretation of the Constitution. And then, you can kind of, form your own ideas about it because again, so much stuff today has so much bias in it and everything. So I think that's really important that we think about what influence we have over kids. I was going to ask real quick, do you want me to bring up here? I know you gave me this presentation, and so I was going to kind of bring this up a little bit more prominent here. So right in the middle here, you can see this little presentation that you got. So you do have a website, and of course, all these things we talk about, like the book itself, all that stuff, I'll put links in the show notes and everything here of these links that you can go to. But you do have a website here, correct? readconstitution.com.
Right, readconstitution.com, and that's my message. Read the Constitution, study it, love, learn the Constitution. So and on my website is my books, and then I have some other resources and stuff on there. So yes.
Okay, all right. So definitely check out that website, readconstitution.com. I suppose here you can see here the two books that I kind of highlighted here before. Again, the U.S. Constitution Rhymes and then the Volume 2, which is the side-by-side. I really like the side-by-side one because I think it's really cool that you can actually see the actual text and see the rhyme as well there in there. So I really like that. Did you want to add anything here?
If I could. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I was just going to explain the difference between the two.
Okay.
So the first one, the red one, is Volume 1, which is super fun, and it's shorter, and it just goes through every article and every amendment, and has usually 5 or 6 little rhymes that go with each one, so that it gives you a really good framework of what's in each of the articles, what's in each of the amendments, and it does it through rhymes. That's little, a little images, I guess, not images.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really helpful to have, which I love that. And then the Volume 2, which I'm super excited about, is especially for everybody, I guess, educators, homeschoolers, adults, kids. I put for all ages. It's because, like I said, most of us adults don't really read the Constitution, and these are companions to the Constitution. But this second one is more side by side. So that one gets you through all of the articles, all of the amendments, with one side is the actual verbiage of the Constitution itself, and I've broken it up into every section, every clause, one little thing at a time, and I'll have some samples to show you. And then so you could actually read that verbiage of the Constitution, which I think is important, and then right beside it is the fun little rhymes that go with it, and then plus some resources at the end. So this is ideal to really have the Constitution right by your side as you're reading, as you're following along.
Yeah, and it's nice too that you've kind of chunked it there. That it's not, because I mean, if you just look at just the text of the Constitution, it's kind of overwhelming. If you just try to look at the whole thing, but if you got it broken up into the little pieces and everything, it makes it a lot easier to kind of look at and everything. So. I guess we did talk a little bit about your background here.
Yeah.
Talking about how you're a homeschooling parent and everything, and just really love American history. I guess I'll ask you a quick question here off the cuff. I know you love constitutional history, but is there any other part of American history that you're really passionate about?
Um, right now. I'm really interested in founding father stories. I just really want to know about, you know, how everything got started and their personal lives and all these kinds of things. So I'm really interested right now in founding father history.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some cool stories there with the founding fathers. And again, I've always heard some historians say that, it's a miracle that we won the American Revolution, but it's almost more of a miracle that we had such geniuses in governmental thinking at one time in America. That's almost the greater miracle than us winning the revolution, is that we had these great thinkers all together at one time in America that were able to put this all together for us. So I think that's kind of interesting to think about and everything. So
Yeah, I love that.
so I guess you had here a slide here about why teach the U.S. Constitution. We've kind of covered that a little bit. Was there anything you wanted to add on here?
Um, I think I just like to emphasize that I put this thing about how, well, maybe it's not on there, but if we want to if you want to really teach something and love something, then I really think that we need to understand it. And that's why I just think it's so important to read it and to find fun ways to be able to understand it in more interesting ways. But yeah, I think I've kind of touched on
Okay.
that.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, we definitely can agree. We have one big agreement here. Learning the Constitution is extremely important. For our history, for our future, everybody should be reading and studying the Constitution. That's for sure. But I guess here you had kind of a little bit of an example of some of what you might see in the book.
Yeah. I just wanted to kind of show how it's formatted and how it is. My glasses, I can see that. So as you can see, this is volume 2, so this is a side-by-side version. So chapter 1 is about the Constitution, so I wanted to have the first chapter without the side-by-side, just some rhymes about what the Constitution's about and why it's important. So there's there will be several pages about that. Right, so the Constitution, and I'm just going to read this one, because this is how my rhymes sound pretty much throughout the whole books, is the Constitution gives us laws meant to keep us free, filled with rules and regulations for our liberty. So these are just kind of quick, simple things, and then, so that's chapter 1, and it'll continue to just have some interesting things about the Constitution. Chapter 2 is preamble to the Constitution. So you can read the preamble, and then we have pages that will touch on each part of the preamble, so that's a little bit more understandable. So like a framework. The preamble is a framework for a just government to establish peace and justice designed with this intent. Kind of just flows. Go ahead.
Yeah, and definitely, the preamble, it's just, it's one big run-on sentence. It's like, you think of the preamble and you think it's got to be this great statement that's probably 3 or 4 paragraphs long. It's just like one run-on sentence, but when you really break it down and see what each little part really means, it's pretty profound what they put there in the document. So yeah, that's a cool way to break it down there in your book. But then I guess you went on here to if you want to explain here, chapter 3, kind of how you put this together.
Yeah. And then from here, chapter 3 is the articles of the Constitution, so 1 through 7, kind of tells about what the article's about. And then Article 1, Section 1. So as you can see, I broke it down like that. So on the left side is the way that it's written in the Constitution. On the right side, my rhymes. So, and it just kind of keeps going throughout each article like that. And I really love that you can see it side by side, because I think it's important to learn and read the language of the Constitution and then have a rhyme that, that's kind of what that could mean. You can kind of go back and forth. I think it's easier to discuss, though, when you have like a rhyme to be able to do that, or like Article 1, Section 2, and then I go into Clause 1. So you could read that left side, and then on the right side, House of Representatives. The House of Representatives are elected, it appears, by the people of their states, elected every 2 years. That's a little more simple to talk about. And so,
yeah, but you got the basics there. You got, elected by the people. You got the terms in there, and so yeah, you got the kind of the very basics there. So they remember that. So yeah, that's really cool the way you put that together there. And so if we move on here, I suppose you got a little bit more here of like Article 1, Section 3, and again you got the clauses and everything. So I don't know if you wanted to explain a little bit of what you got, what we have here.
I think they just wanted to show how it continues.
Okay.
Article 1, and you can see Article 1, Section 3, Clause 2. I think when you're teaching it, it's so helpful. It was helpful for me to learn it, to break it down. And as you can see, sometimes there's a lot in one little, or sometimes like in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 on the one on the right, there's a smaller amount of the Constitution, but I wrote several rhymes because I wanted to hit at each point, and make sure it's really clear, because that's about electors. That could be really confusing a little bit. So like, how many electors? What are electors? Cannot be electors? Just, I don't know. To me, I just get really excited about teaching every little detail and all the little parts and doing it in a way that
I have to confess to you, I've been teaching the Constitution for many years. I still struggle with trying to explain electors. That still is something that's just, we're trying to talk about ancient Rome and how they put things together, and then we try to, and so it just, that I think this is a really good way to look at it. If you can, break it down into these little rhymes, it's going to make it understandable a lot easier. Mm-hmm. All right, and then you went into, of course, you got the Bill of Rights in here and everything.
Yeah, and then Chapter 4 is the amendments. So then we do the Bill of Rights, and then from there we just get all the way through the 27 amendments. And some of these could be really long, and some a little bit shorter, but there's so much fun and interesting to read and learn about, and do it through rhymes. It's fun, I think. Like Amendment 1, middle 5 rights, just to get right to the point. The 5 rights that protect us are found in Amendment 1: freedom of religion, speech, press, assemble, petition. So just kind of, you can kind of catch it all in there. And mm-hmm. So that's the format, though, that I go through. All the amendments are in this format.
Okay, yeah. So you've got the amendment on the left, and then it breaks it down into different rhymes there on the right hand side. Here we can see some more of the amendments. Again, getting past the Bill of Rights. I mean, so many times, a lot of times we focus on the Bill of Rights, and we don't really look at those other amendments that come later. Sometimes you look at that in high school, maybe, and everything. But yeah, you've got it all broken down here all the way through with all the 27 amendments. And of course, my students are always astounded by the fact when I tell them, what is it? I think the 27th. What year was that? Was that 71?
1971.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, yeah. So it's it's pretty remarkable, like how long it's been since there's actually been anything really added to the Constitution. So yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of interesting. So again, you got it all broken down with the text on one side, rhyme on the other. And then if we go on here, okay, and then if you want to explain this a little bit, what you've got on this page.
Yeah, so then Chapter 5 is our resources. So this is really fun in the back of the book to be able to have some interesting resources. We have the preamble to the Constitution, the signers of the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, signers of Declaration of Independence, Presidents of the United States, which you can see on the right side. Mm-hmm. Just put that up there. And then Pledge of Allegiance. It's just kind of a good reference to be able to go to the back of the book and have those documents there to be able to look through. Right. Paulo actually showed samples, but we just kind of glanced through those real quick after. But I don't know, I think that this could be helpful for anybody that's learning it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I was going to point out here, I was going to go back one slide here. I do like the fact, again, that you have the dates when these things are ratified. And so the cool thing is what you could do is look at when those amendments were added and then come over here and kind of look at, well, who was the president at that time? And then that can kind of roll you all together into studying what that period of time, what was going on with that president in office, and then how that amendment played a role during their presidency. So I really like the way you have that resource in there as well that makes it simple to be able to go back and forth and look at those dates and everything. So that's really nice that you have that in there. And then here, of course, you got a workbook section. Yeah. So, did you want to explain a little bit what you've got here?
Yeah, and the workbook section at the back is also something that's a great resource. And I just went through. There's U.S. Constitution questions, preamble, fill in the blanks, amendment questions, Bill of Rights badge, facts to memorize, the answers, of course, and then there's a glossary at the end, which is terms of the Constitution and government terms and things like that. So on the worksheets, I just have a sample. In the back on the top, it'll tell you where the answer is on page 121 in that book, in my book. And then as you go through, I think this could be helpful. At the end of each question, it tells you what page in the book to go back to find the answer, which article, which section it's in. So this can also be a good study guide, especially once you get it filled out and things like that. So
Absolutely. That's great that you got it there, especially the articles, because again, I know for me personally, when I teach the Constitution, I really try to drive home with my students, okay, if we talk about anything with Congress, you know that it's going to be Article 1. Or if we talk about anything with the presidency, more than likely it's going to be Article 2, And so I like the way you have that there, because that way when they go through the question, it reinforces, okay, Article 1. Yep, Article 1. If I'm doing anything that has to do with Congress, I'm basically going back and looking at Article 1 of the Constitution. So I like the fact that you have that in there as well. And so here you have more examples of some of the workbooks. So you have like the preamble there. That's neat that you have the fill in the blank there with that. Was there anything else you wanted to explain with this page?
I don't think so. That's just examples again, and then the amendments plus in same format.
And again, it's nice that we have the page number and which amendment you need to look to and everything. So actually, currently right now with some of my students, I'm covering the Quartering Act, and I had to remind them about the Third Amendment, because that's always the one that they look at and they're like, why on earth do we have an amendment saying that we're not going to have soldiers in our home? Because they're just like, that just seems crazy. And I'm like, well, you got to go back and think about what the British were doing prior to the American Revolution. So that's how we kind of tie that in with studying the causes of the American Revolution there with some of these amendments. So there's lots of amendments, of course, that go back to what the British were doing and everything. So and then here you have some like facts to memorize and kind of another amendment kind of graphic organizer here.
Yeah, the little match, and then the facts to memorize. I put together some of those. So there's a few pages of these short little rhymes, and these are actually things that could be memorized, or things that you can learn a little bit easier. September 17th, hooray, it's U.S. Constitution Day. If you're a homeschooler, or I don't even know a classroom, maybe that's something you can pick one per week, where you have it up on your refrigerator, where you practice it every day, or something like that. This is something could be memorized pretty easily, so I have several of those. 1865, we adore for slavery will be no more. Just kind of fun little things that you could memorize. And maybe I could say one thing about rhymes too, is when you're rhymes or music or songs and things like that, that touches the whole creative right side of our brain, right? So that just kind of adds to another learning style of people. And so we all have different learning styles. So not only do you have the logical, but when you do things like this and with rhymes and poems and things, then you're actually adding that emotion. You're adding the creativity and emotion. And that is a little, sometimes that could be a little bit more powerful and easy to remember. Can make a bit of different connection with that. So,
yeah, and absolutely. And if you're a classroom teacher, I mean, I'm sure you've heard of differentiation, where we have to find ways to differentiate for maybe certain students struggle with something, and so we have to find a way to differentiate. This could be a great resource if you're a classroom teacher to be able to get this book, and if you have a student that's like struggling with just simply learning the flat history or the flat amendment or whatever, you could take some of these things and intersperse those in with your students. So again, it would be a great resource for teachers in the classroom as well. And so here you got some of the again, these are some of the questions. This comes some of the answer keys here and everything.
Yep, and then just the answers in the back, and then there's a glossary. So A to Z with different constitutional and government terms.
Yeah, so
that could be really helpful. And you could use those. I know that as educators, those could be used to write definitions, as spelling words, as more for further study and things like that.
Yeah, so that's nice again that you got it right there, so everything's accessible in one place. You don't have to go looking somewhere else to get those definitions and everything. All right, and I suppose this is going back more to your first book here. Again, it's just showing some of the basic rhymes and everything that you have in the first book, correct?
Right. So we don't need to really go into detail. I just wanted to show kind of the format of this book, which is it's not the side-by-side, but chapter 1 of this book just does the same thing. Why is the Constitution important? And here's some fun little rhymes about that. There's some little facts that you could memorize. So that's chapter 1. Okay, you can keep going, sorry.
That's okay.
And then same thing, chapter 2, preamble. So then it talks all about the preamble. And this is a little bit more, just a little bit more of a information so that you know what it's about, and then you can go to your Constitution for further details. So that's kind of how this book works.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great page again. If you're trying to learn the preamble, breaking it down here a lot, it makes it a lot simpler. Breaking it down into those little smaller chunks is a lot easier. And so again, you got your different articles here, and again, you're just kind of showing here how the first book is organized, and so again, going through the different articles, legislative, executive, of course, with Article 1, Article 2, and then of course getting to the judicial, state powers, amendments, all that stuff in those next few articles. So, and again too, I like the fact that you have some graphics here that help out as well. Again, if you're more of a visual learner, that kind of helps to reinforce the idea. And there we go with all.
It's just simple icons and then Article 6 and Article 7 and same format.
All right, so yeah, so kind of that same format, just not with the text right next to it like the other book would have. And then again, you got the amendments broken down here in the last section of the book, correct?
Right, and then that's all. Chapter 4 is all the amendments, and then Chapter 5 we do have in this book the signers of the Constitution written out, and then the entire Declaration of Independence is in Chapter 6.
Have you ever thought of, I guess, quick question, have you ever thought of doing the Declaration of Independence kind of in this format as well? Like, I mean, I know it would be shorter than the Constitution, but have you ever thought about doing that?
I have actually.
Oh.
Most of the time when I look in this book and I'm looking at the back, I'm like, oh, Declaration of Independence. I think I just kind of put it in there, but especially now that I've done the other, I just think it would be so much fun to break up that Declaration of Independence, because that's so long and there's so much interesting information in there.
Yeah, because some of what Jefferson writes here is just so, just profound statements. But of course, then it kind of gets interesting, at least interesting to me, that it just kind of turns into a big complaint list of the king did this, the king did that, the king did this, the king did that. But that bit, the beginning of it and the end of it are really like, wow, these are really profound statements. But then it's just kind of like, yeah, let's sit and complain for a while. There's kind of a lot of it there. So,
which I think could make some really good rhymes.
Yeah, you probably could make some good rhymes there. And so I guess one of the other questions, of course, I was going to ask you is what were some resources, other resources that you found that you really like? And I suppose here you've kind of listed a few of those. So I don't expect you to talk about Daily Bellringer, because probably most people that are going to be watching this already are aware of this one. But I guess this Constitution board game, I guess I haven't seen anything about this.
Okay, well, I do want to mention the Daily Bellringer because I just love your stuff, and I just want to say how great it is. And,
well, thanks.
And I do want to say too how much I do appreciate and have noticed how unbiased that you are, and that does make a difference, because then you feel like, oh, I could trust these. It doesn't matter what subject. I know if I put one of those videos on, then I'm going to get the information that without one way or the other.
Well, that's one of my big goals, because as a teacher, I spent so much time looking for resources like different videos and stuff I could show in class, and sometimes I'd find a really good one, and then all of a sudden there'd be something in there. It's just like, well, that's completely just one-sided, or there would be bad language in it, or they would tell some kind of joke that was just like, well, that doesn't really, I can't show that in a classroom. And so yeah, I want to make a resource that a teacher can look at, or a homeschooling parent can look at and know, if I put this on, I know that it's going to be appropriate for my child to watch, and it's not going to be biased. And so that's kind of, one of my big goals. But thanks for saying that about my channel and everything. But I guess I'm interested to hear here too, what are some of these other resources that you have here?
Okay, and I'm sure I could have put more. I just wanted to add a couple. Constitution board game I'm super excited about. It's called the Constitution Quest, constitutionquest.com. I would recommend that anybody look that up. I was at a homeschool convention in San Diego a month or two ago, and I met the creators of the game. They had it out. They showed me how to play it. It looks kind of like a big Monopoly game in a way, but they've made it so simple and fun. They use it. They say classrooms, teachers love it to use in their class. It's a game that really does teach you about the Constitution and everything else. So if you go to constitutionquest.com, I think that is a really fun game. I'm excited. I've ordered it. I'm waiting for it to come. I don't know. Hopefully I can get my family to play it. If not, I'm just going to sit and do it because I know I'm going to learn more about the Constitution through that game. And then I just really get a lot of information. I like the National Constitution Center. That's constitutioncenter.org. They have virtual field trips sometimes, and museums and different things and different information that you can sort through. That's one of the sources that I use, is constitutioncenter.org. And then, of course, I had to put Schoolhouse Rock around for some fun videos. But I'm just a collector of anything Constitution and liberty-minded. I get workbooks and books and booklets and posters and all kinds of stuff just to learn from. I think even as an adult, then we could I get, grade school workbooks that I order for me so that I could practice and learn, because I kind of like them.
I guess I'm curious if you ever looked at iCivics before. If you check out iCivics has some pretty neat stuff. They have some like really neat like online games and everything that you can play. I actually, when I teach my Constitution, of course, when we talk about the Electoral College, I have the kids play a game where they have to run for president, and they kind of learn how, you have to go campaign in certain states because that's the state where you're going to get more electoral votes and, and all that stuff. So you might check out iCivics as well. But yeah, I'm definitely going to check out that Constitution board game, because I know my kids at home, they like playing board games, and if I can tie in some history, they'll probably buy into it. So yeah, I'll definitely check that out and everything. So and I guess here you had the 12 values of the U.S. Constitution. I guess if you want to talk a little bit about this or expand on this a little bit.
Right. I just wanted to mention this, and then I think the other sites we don't really need to go through.
Okay.
The 12 values of the Constitution is just something that I created. It's on my website, and I took the preamble and kind of broke it down and listed what I think are some of the founding principles and values that our Constitution was founded upon. And so it's not just information, rules, regulation, rights, limits, and things like that. It's founded, I believe, on principles of freedom and liberty and so many other things that there is. And I think that could be a good way to, I guess, recognizing those principles and values is to be able to connect it to the Constitution. So we talk about, say, we the people. That means that we have a voice, that our voice matters, that we could express ourselves and make a difference. So with our children, then we should be able to, once in a while we could connect that to the Constitution, like if they're in the classroom, and they're reluctant to make a comment or to share, it's like, no, you're we the people. That's what we are in this country. You have a voice. What you say make a difference, and that's what our Constitution teaches. And I think that could give a little bit more credibility to that and application, I guess, to the Constitution. So I just wanted to mention something that I think is good.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. A lot of people think the Constitution is just simply, here's a list of rules, here's a list of procedures, here's a list of, basic rights, which are all there. But like you said, there's values that are in there, like we the people. It's like, it doesn't say we the king, or we the royal family, or we the, representatives. It says we the people. I mean, yes, we are a republic, but it says, we the people. So in the end, the people are the ones who have the power. And that's a important thing to remember with our government, that we're the ones that in the end have the power, and how important it is that we go out and get involved and understand what's going on and everything, because if we don't do that, what's going to happen to us? So yeah, we got to make sure that we're keeping up with all that. So I guess you said you didn't want to go through the other slides here, so I'll go ahead and minimize this a little bit. So again, I'll emphasize here, the book, the U.S. Constitution Rhymes. Like I said, I'm going to put a link down in the description of the video to the books. You said they're available on Amazon, correct?
Yep, they're available on Amazon and on my website.
Okay, so again, and the website was readconstitution.com, correct?
Correct.
All right, so yeah, like I said, I'll put some links in there to that. I'll put some links into some of those resources that you were suggesting there. So I'll put some links down there to that and everything down in the description. So again, I know sometimes, especially, when if you're new to teaching, or if you're a homeschool parent, tackling the Constitution is kind of a daunting task. It's one of those things that, again, when you look at it, you're like, how on earth am I ever going to get through all this and have my kids understand it? Here's a great resource to use. Here's something you can grab, and it breaks it down very simply for you. So definitely check out this U.S. Constitution Rhymes. It's just kind of a cool idea, and I think a great resource for educators to use. So was there anything you wanted to add here at the end, Debbie, before we sign off?
Just that I appreciate being here. Thank you for talking to me about this, and I just hope that, I don't know, that this inspires people to want to read the Constitution, study it, be excited about it, and yeah, that's probably about it. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking with me. Thank you for sending me the books and checking out, allow me to check out these books and everything. I'm gonna start working on probably my curriculum for next year and see if I can find some ways. I'm gonna put these into my classroom routine and everything. So again, thank you so much, and again, thank you so much for watching. Those of you that are watching, and I hope that you check out these U.S. Constitution rhymes. And so with that, I will sign off. So I guess I'll sign off the way I always do. Hopefully, you learned something, and thanks for watching.